Hello and welcome to episode 149 of My Circus, My Monkeys. Earlier this week, Donald Trump was inaugurated as our 47th president. Now, shortly after the election, I did an episode to help folks process those results. Now, I don't know what political party you align with, but I think if you are working in higher ed, no matter who you voted for, you can still acknowledge that many departments, students, and professionals were negatively impacted by some of the policies enacted during Trump's last term. Since this is top of mind again, today I have a guest, Dr. LaShawnda Fields, a scholar in Equitable Experiences in higher ed and a teacher of social work practice. And she shares with us her perspective on the election, and even more importantly, what we can do now to support ourselves and our students during this term. So stay tuned.
You're listening to My Circus, My Monkeys, the podcast for supervisors in education or any field that emphasizes growth and development. If you want to rein in the chaos and transform your team to better serve your students and clients, keep listening. This podcast explores essential information on supervision, employee engagement, and using a strengths-based framework to empower you and your team. We'll examine the latest research in psychology, neuroscience, education, and beyond to help you and your team get to the next level with your host, Ann Brackett, the Chief Engagement Officer of Strengths University.
So I'm open to taking this conversation kind of wherever. I mean, really, like I did my post-election episode. And you listened to that. So it could be a jumping off place, or not. But again, what I was really struck with was your post right after the election, which is like, well, I don't know why you guys are why you're so shocked, because
right.
Have you met us? Like, you know,
seriously, right?
Yeah.
Let's have a moment of reflection here.
Right.
Let's look at the timeline,
right.
And be honest with ourselves.
Can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your journey? Because I met you when we worked at the same institution, and you were working in international students, right? Yeah, that was
both. So I was
okay.
the assistant director of international programs and DEI.
Okay, cool, excellent.
Yeah.
That's
so,
right.
So here we go. No. So formally, I am Dr. LaShawnda Fields. I have a PhD in social work. I am currently an assistant professor in a school of social work. It'll be really easy to figure it out, but I'm not going to name the institution. So I am in my 5th year. I am up for tenure, so the rubber has met the road. I study currently primarily Black women within social work education, and that is students, faculty, and staff members within schools of social work. Came to be because of my experience as a PhD student. I attended Washington University in St. Louis, always top ranked school of social work, and I was the only Black person in my cohort. And I was thinking, wait a minute now. First off, you are located in St. Louis. It's a segregated city, but it is a diverse city at the same time. I was there on interview day, so I saw all these applicants. Now, that's not to say that people couldn't have a different institution that was a better fit for them, but it really was troublesome to think that I was the only person who identified as Black in this very large cohort. Let me frame it, because there were 13 students. That's really big. On average, there's 6 to 8. This was the first year that they were offering a PhD in public health also. So across 2 disciplines that are both social sciences that typically have large representation of diverse scholars, it was just me. And I was like, wait, thinking back to when I did my MSW, the Brown School of Washington University in St. Louis, I was often the only Black person in my courses. And I was like, well, that's been like 5-6 years ago. A lot has changed. That's problematic for me. And I often felt tokenized and all these other things. And I was often look to be the voice of Black people. And it's like, but I can only be me. I can only talk to you about my experiences. This is not a monolithic group, and all the things. And so I thought about the faculty makeup, and the faculty at that time was fairly diverse. It was much better than it had been during my MSW program. I actually never had a tenure track Black faculty member in my time as a master's student. And I believe at that time there was maybe only two or three on the faculty. And so I was like, well, that's going to be a problem already, right? That representation matters. And all the things that come with that. And so I was like, let me study this, because what it ultimately said, if social work institutions, if educational spaces can't do this work, why will we expect them to be able to train the stewards of the discipline and the profession going forward? Right? Like if amongst colleagues we're not seeing these values and ethics of social work as a profession being espoused and acted upon, I don't have a lot of hope for what most vulnerable segments of our population, which are those who are typically interacting with social workers, are going to experience.
Mm.
And so I was like, that's a great place for me to disrupt some stuff. So yeah, I switched because initially when I started my program, it was 2014 when I applied. Michael Brown had just been murdered, all the things, right? Living in St. Louis, teaching as an adjunct at WashU in the school of social work. I was teaching human diversity. I was, as you stated, in the position doing international programming and DEI at the other institution as well. So I was looking at Black parenting, and I was specifically looking for parents who, against all odds, are producing these situations where their children still grow up and go on to do great things. So they're facing constant poverty, under-resourced schools, high crime areas, all of these things, but yet these people are getting out and doing great things. I still am interested in that. But I think this is more important and more timely, I feel like.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people doing that work. There aren't as many folks. I'm not the only one, of course, but there aren't as many folks who are studying the experiences of Black women in particular in social work education. So that's my
Okay.
primary scholarship. But then I kind of do like all things Black in a sense.
Sure.
I'm right now spending some time with a colleague looking at police brutality. I have looked at Black, Indigenous, and Latinx faculty who make it all the way up the pipeline to be a full professor at these top ranked institutions, which is a very, very drop in the bucket. I'm also interested now in employment, and particular employment within higher education has been a social determinant of health for Black women because we are dying by suicide, strokes, heart attack, heart disease, all the things. And a great deal of people are carrying a lot of unnecessary stress and weight, so to speak, to fit into these spaces that were not with them in mind. I know that college is not for everyone, but it is my mission such that anyone who's interested can go and have an experience. Because we also have to acknowledge that college still remains one of the best ways for people to experience upward mobility. So I want to make sure I'm removing as many hurdles and barriers as possible. Native to St. Louis, it's what I know. It's got a very checkered past when it comes to matters of politics and race relations and redlining and segregation and all the things. So, yeah, that's me. It's me. It's me.
Excellent. Yes, what a wonderful opportunity for you to take advantage of all the lovely racism in St.
Right?
Louis. How
Cashing
nice for you. Excellent. So, do you feel like it would be worthwhile for you or me to read the post that you put? Like, I don't want to.
Yes.
Okay,
Would
cool.
frame it probably very well.
Okay, excellent.
So it states, I am truly sorry for anyone who did leave space for America to be exactly who most of us have known it to be. I did this in 2016 and I was in shambles. This time I left space for white supremacy and the patriarchy to do what it does. I'm disappointed, but life goes on. In reality, much of my concern is for those coming up behind me. I'm about to lecture on hood feminism this afternoon, and I'm excited to do so. Every single day, I take on white supremacy and the patriarchy in an effort to dismantle these systems. I vote religiously, but it's honestly the smallest task of all that I do to right these wrongs. I encourage everyone to identify a point of intervention and do that well. This fight is for the weak or the impatient. Dedicated my life to resistance. America has, and I hope the majority, and that's in quotes, gets what they asked for, and somehow those who voted differently manage to be spared from most of the nonsense. Try to have a wonderful day, you all. 4 years is a long time, and we cannot exhaust ourselves before it begins. VP Harris ran an exceptional race and a more qualified candidate. As Quincy Jones is about to be laid to rest, the lyrics of Just Once are quite fitting. Again, in quotes, I gave my best, but I guess my best wasn't good enough. We didn't deserve her, and may God continue to bless her and everyone on her team.
Yeah, that really struck me because honestly, I was confused because I thought it was going to be such a tight race. That's what everybody was preparing for. Like, you won't know the next day. And so I tried to process it like I could, and then when I saw that, I'm like, you know what? Yeah.
Yeah. And when I started out saying I did this to myself in 2016, so going back to 2016, that was that well, that was an interesting time. And it honestly also feels like a lifetime ago
Mm,
and way more than 8 years ago. So time is just really interesting in that way. But I here's what I didn't leave space for in 2016. It wasn't that I didn't know what white supremacy patriarchy was capable of. I did, however, think that it was enough to just inch it out just enough. Only needed a little, right? Like literally miss it by that much sometimes. And I was like, I know it's real out here. I understand. I've experienced these things, but I thought ultimately, and this is really key to what we will probably talk about too. What was key to me was the thinking that intelligence would supersede ignorance. And that was my error in 2016. But by the time we fast forward to 2024, I've watched the ignorance play out in so many different ways where I no longer could allow myself to have that because there's something so interesting when I think about our global rankings in the education system and when I see students at the college level who at best are maybe sometimes writing at what I think is be an eighth grade level. Like there's just so many signs when you look at like TikTok videos and things like people really do ignorant things that make me question like how did we end up here? And that's not new. It's always been a thing, but I think we just get so much more exposure to it because of social media now and the things that people say, the things that people believe and latch on to, and it's like, oh. So then I get upset sometimes because I'm like, ignorance really is bliss. Because if you're just kind of going through life like, oh, it's just all good and hey, that's that doesn't matter. Nothing matters, right? Versus being conscious and aware and always feeling, and I'm speaking for myself here, always feeling like I'm supposed to be doing something to right these wrongs. I'm supposed to be contributing to this side of the equation and not that side. And that is a burden that one bears. And they always say heavy is the head that wears the crown. And it's like, feel that.
mm.
I don't have a jewel uh, crown or anything, so I'm getting played because I'm wearing this for free. But and I'm broke. But no, seriously though. But yeah, the polls and Steve Bernanke and all these folks were like, there's no way that in 2016 still that this could happen, that this could happen. And so I was like, okay, well, if the professionals, the people who they get paid to do this, they're telling me it'll be tight, but ultimately we're good, then we have to be good. Um, So yeah, for this next go round, I was like, listen, that was someone who had been in the political realm. You know, Hillary had been in the game. She knew the game. She knew the key players. She had had some successes along the way and all the things. And my thoughts, immediate thoughts were, because I'm with you, it was like, I'm Team Uncle Joe. Um, you kind of serving drunk uncle now after the Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm a little iffy about that. So again, I was down, but very nervous. Then I got this rush of energy for like 5 minutes, and I was like, wait a minute. Ain't no
Mm,
way in the world the first woman to be president in America is going to be a woman of color.
mm,
And one of those colors being black. You weren't gonna be able to sell me on that. So part of me also was always like, not a black woman. Like this
mm,
country uplifting a black woman to the highest elected office, even for those people who say, oh, it's just you know, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Ceremonial.
mm,
Like presidents have limited power and the real power is held by the Supreme Court or the Congress or people who feel like that. I was like, it doesn't matter. A
mm,
black woman, because you may not have seen it, but the day Kamala announced her candidacy, I made a post of a picture of the book Massage Noir.
mm,
And I said, I need you all to understand what this term means because you're going to hear a lot of massage noir going forward, and you're going to hear this word a lot going forward, which is a particular type of misogyny aimed at Black women. And it's again, no history, thinking about the tropes, the angry black woman, the Jezebel, which is the over sexualized, hypersexualized black woman, and the mammy, the self-sacrificing black woman, for the good of the white people she's caring for. I'm thinking, but I'm gonna play
mm.
along. I'm gonna donate my money. I'm gonna make my. I went out and bought me some Tiffany blue Converse to wear
Mm,
inauguration day. Literally the day after she announced her candidacy, I reserved a hotel room because I would
mm.
be there just in case. Because sometimes you really want to be wrong,
Right,
but you know,
right.
I was right,
You were, unfortunately.
unfortunately.
And so one of the reasons I wanted you to come on the podcast is because most of the people listening to the podcast are folks who are supervisors in higher ed. And
Hmm.
I think many people don't really know what to do at this point, especially those folks who are working in DEI or what's left of DEI if they're already in a state that has dismantled it. Because,
Hmm.
even just with some of the coaching I do and the Supervisor Strengths Institute that we do once a semester, people, are asking, like, how do I continue to do this? And, people, like, should I quit? Should I get out? What can we do? And, there's still students that need to be served. And how does one, because, you said 4 years is a long time and we can't exhaust ourselves before it begins. I think just being in our feelings in this sense
Hmm.
of woe is so draining. How
Right.
do we figure out how to make the best of these next 4 years for ourselves, our teams, and the students that we serve?
That is a wonderful question. Um, oh my gosh, with endless answers. What I would offer is probably what I'm going to do myself. People can take that and do with what they please or nothing at all. But I think what I've decided is healthy for me is I'm going to be anti 2016. So what I did then is every word I said, I tried everything written about him. I I kept waiting for this moment of at some point it's going to click and people are going to decide, okay, we've had enough of this. Let's move on. I didn't know what that would look like. Impeachments happened. I was so hopeful and optimistic that change would come, that we would not have to endure a full 4 years.
Mm,
Wrong again. Thank God none of this was like part of my dissertation stuff because I was a student. I have never been more wrong, I feel like. But
mm,
so first thing is I'm really engaging in a level of self-care around
mm,
all things politics related. I'm on the sideline. Um in a couple of ways. I'm not consuming news as much as possible. Of course, I still see headlines, I still hear things. I'm still partner with someone who eats politics for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Mm.
So those conversations are going to happen. I will have enough updates, I guess. But he is also trying to be respectful and not have as many conversations with me. Because I think that that is just draining. Um, I for 4 years, like I said, all day, it was nothing for me to invest probably 4 to 6 hours a day
Mm.
on what was happening with that administration, who was quitting, who was coming, what did they say, what did they do, what's this policy, how is it going to impact? And so just being mindful of protecting yourself as best you can. Also, to the point I made in the post, really figuring out what is your point of intervention. And so if I think about myself, the faculty member, as an advisor, as a colleague, all these things, I think the best way for me to proceed is disrupting this trend of what I believe is a lack of historical understanding, that ignorance. I just don't think a lot of people know. And I think a lot of people don't want to know because then it may be harder to ignore. And so, how do we educate the masses? And one of the things that I believe a lot of people are like, oh, that's just performative. I honestly think, though, that book clubs and things of that nature are a great start.
Mm.
Thinking about if, if organizations with, or departments rather, within these organizations have budgets, who's coming in to do speaking engagements? How far can you really push it before someone pushes back on you? Those who are in faculty roles and things of that nature, especially those who are tenured, academic freedom is still supposed to be a thing. Shit, push beyond the limit, not to the limit. We're gonna go beyond the limit, right? And I think it's important for us. I start every class with I don't create safe spaces, I create brave spaces. Safety maintains the status quo, and I'm not at all interested in that. I'm not interested in my students taking that approach either. And so, how can we all be brave together? And so, what that means is wherever you would typically go, ask you to go a bit further, even if initially it's just one step further, then two steps, right? And so, for example, I don't use traditional textbooks. I look for books that I will educate my students in a way outside just higher education. And so my one class, the first assigned text is Cast, The Origins of Our Discontent. That's Isabel Wilkerson. And it really gives, for me, one of the most recent, thorough histories of how we came to be. And it's also a book that not once uses the word race.
Oh,
And
wow.
by the time we get to the end of that book, and I ask my students, um, do you recall ever seeing the word race in it? And some of them are like, yeah, it's when she talked about this, or it's when she, and I was like, nope, it
Mm.
literally does not
Wow.
have the word race in it. And they're like blown away by that. And they're like, but the message was so clear because it is. And then I think it's important to still do the work around educating people around eugenics and the eugenics movement, that there are
Mm.
no true biological differences, that race is a social construct, but it has real implications. And have people understand, what does that mean? What is, because we look at phenotypes and we're like, I can clearly see that we are different, genetically, but we're not. Those are such small differences that impact how we look, from one race to another. And a lot of that is biological. I mean, I'm sorry, not biological. It is environmental.
Mm.
As we came out of one spot and started migrating into other places, we had to change, adapt, evolve to survive that, right? And so I think the education piece is really key, helping people understand what happened, what's still happening, and how what happened all those years ago still impacts us now. A
Mm.
lot of people will say, oh, that's like a victim mindset. Slavery was so long ago and my people never owned slaves. I tell students on the first class too, you don't ever get to say that in my class. You do not get to say, I never owned slaves. Duh. The age y'all are now, y'all was born in like the year 2002 or something. No, that's not what we're talking about.
Mm.
But I think that that is defense mechanism that people rely upon. And my point is you didn't necessarily create the problem, but you're benefiting from it, and the onus is on you to correct it. I almost always, at least every other lecture, end with this is white people's problem to fix. However, it is impacting everybody who's not white.
Mm.
But if I, as a black woman, could fix this, I would have done it. There is no benefit to me waiting. So clearly, I'm not going to be able to dismantle the system, at least not alone. So I need, I liken it to gay people don't get rights, straight people don't vote for it because it's the straight people who hold the power, right? So
Right.
gay does not happen if a straight person didn't sign the bill, voted in the law. If the Supreme Court, which as far as I know, everyone on the Supreme Court identifies as straight, if they don't uphold this, right, women don't get the right to vote if men didn't sign off on it because
Right.
women didn't have power. So as a black person, a person of color, more broadly speaking, I can't fix this. I would have by now. And so I am leaning on, hoping for white people to step up and do the right thing. The hard part about that is often the right thing would, they have to relinquish some power and privilege. That's
Sure.
a lot of people.
Right.
Uh, so I think educate people, protecting ourselves, and being bold and brave in our actions. Again, um, you know, thinking about what books you're using, what videos, what podcasts are you like really decolonizing across these curriculums. And that's something that we all can control. It would be at most institutions very difficult for someone higher up to go through and see every medium
Mm.
that every instructor is using or whatever department is doing and things. That's unreasonable in a sense, I feel like.
Sure.
So we use that to our advantage and do these things. Um, I have seen where if we give these students, and I'm often dealing with a lot of students that this is the first time they've had these conversations. I'm the first black instructor they've ever had, from kindergarten all the way through. And my class is primarily juniors and seniors and graduate students. Um, they're often really upset that this is the first time that they are hearing and learning of some of
Mm.
these things. And so, what an amazing position to see that hopefully continues to grow throughout their lives. And they can do the work. They can get out here, and that's going to be different for everyone. For some people, it is going to be the act of voting. For some people, and it's always my hope that they'll actually run for office. The more we can infiltrate these spaces, then I feel like we can be more impactful. Um, I think, being creative in the language that people are using, belonging is becoming a thing now, which, diversity, equity, inclusion, and all of that.
Mm.
Inclusion and belonging they can be used as synonyms, and so we can still do
Sure.
this work. So I think just really being creative and figuring out how best to navigate these murky waters, um, but not necessarily throwing in the towel. But for those who feel like I've done all I can do and move on, hey, self-preservation is the first law of nature. So
Sure.
um, exit and go on and live hopefully a wonderful life because that's what everybody deserves. I don't believe in people feeling the need to be a martyr.
Right.
Most of us are not meant to be doing that. And so I don't think it's about being self-sacrificing and things of that nature either. And being realistic, like every small act matters. There's not always going to be these grandiose, oh, we can sit back and watch these systems fall. That's likely not going to happen. Definitely not in my lifetime, and I'm not sure ever. Because the bigger issue is also have these laws, we have these policies and these practices in place. But what we also know to be true is we're dealing with mindsets and attitudes, and you
Mm.
really can't remove that through policy and things of that nature, right? And so we are imploring people to change, which is one of the things that humans really don't like to do. We do it and all the things, but we are often very resistant to it because we
Sure.
know what we know. We've had lived experiences that force what we know and all of the things, right? And so these small incremental changes matter and they add up. Um, because what we're actually facing is, in my opinion, is the space between what is legal and what is ethical.
Mm,
That's this area. That's where the gap lies for me. With this gray space that I believe that we find ourselves in, you can't legally hang a person. You can't lynch a black person because they exist or they're in a interracial relationship or they're getting a higher wage than you. But what you can do is where we are in between what's ethical and not is you really can make their life a living hell. Right? And so, for example, as you're talking to supervisors and those who hold power, um, who's on the hiring committees? What are we considering a fit? What is a good fit? How do you define that? How do you determine that? Then we can also talk classism. Sometimes resumes are weeded out because of the institution that someone
mm,
went to without even giving any consideration. The person could still be a quality applicant. My journey started at Sanford Brown School of Business.
mm,
Like so many people would probably think that place was a joke and blah 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 blah, but it was accredited. I transferred those credits and you know, look at me now, right?
yeah.
Not that I'm great or anything, but I have now achieved this education from these spaces that at some point I graduated from high school, maybe a 6 to 8 minute drive from Washington University.
Mm,
None of the people came to recruit at my school. None of our counselors ever said that's an institution to consider. They had decided where we were capable of succeeding and not. Thinking about going back to these hiring committees, what are policies and practices? Are you doing blind resume review or are the names on there? Some people are still putting in addresses. Who's Googling zip codes to try to sense who's Googling people on the hiring committees that I've been on? We agree that we will not Google. We will not look at social media. We're really trying to be as inclusive as possible in our recruitment and our hiring practices. And so these are ways we can continue to do this work as well.
mm.
Uh, so that's a very long answer to that question, and it could go on for all of eternity.
Yeah,
But we need to think about how much control we have and how impactful we can be,
sure.
because I don't think the structure, the larger system is really interested and committed to this work right now.
Right. Well, and that, yeah, I mean, of course, I didn't actually mean that you would have all of the
Right,
answers.
right. Oh, you know me
So
better than
just
that.
by the way, yeah. But I think those are some really good points. And I want to go back to one of the things you said pretty early on in your long answer. And that was the self-care. Because I
Hmm.
think that's something that I even harp on, I guess I would say. Like I'm always bringing it up. And I used to in my presentations, I would put the Audre Lorde quote, the caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. And it
Hmm.
wasn't until I read um, a book where they put the whole quote in, that last piece, and that is an act of political warfare, that it really hit home for me.
Hmm.
And that was, in fact, the beginning of the term self-care, because now it's been watered down so much and
Hmm.
it's about massages and buy things and things like
Mimosas
that.
and all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it's really important because we do feel triggered to do, like, what can we do? What can we do? And we feel like, well, we tried to do stuff and it didn't work. So what can we do? Um, I think that's one thing that we can do is care for ourselves so we can do those small things that when you add them up are going to make an impact over time, because it's just so easy to either burn ourselves out to the point we have to just quit or what have you, but also burn ourselves out and we do nothing
Right,
and we just
right.
accept, well, this is how life is and life is terrible.
Yeah, no, that would be horrible. And along those lines, I don't know if you've seen it and, if the viewers will have seen it, but for example, my picture on my profile picture on Facebook right now is like a group of Black women who are like
Mm,
sitting on a ledge and the world is on fire, and it has like 92% on one of the t-shirts or what have you. And there's this idea that Black women have decided, not all, of course, many have decided, we're gonna sit this one out.
mm,
There has been, when we think about Stacey Abrams, um, and others, there's been this idea that, oh, Black women have saved democracy, and all of the things. And it's like, and what have we gotten for that? It's been
mm,
our return on investment in this country of ours, right? And so I count myself as part of that movement. We're gonna sit back and let it be. Um, I'm on the sidelines, and I'll get back in the game when I feel like others are taking the lead and
mm,
really putting themselves out there and doing the work. And I think that is absolutely an act of self-care. I believe that rest is resistance because, to your point, we are not well and capable. We can't do the work. And so the other side wins that way as well. They don't care. Win that way. A win is a win, right? And so if you have these people who are disruptors and whatever, um, just begin to like fall like dominoes, that's a win because there's fewer people pushing back, fighting and resisting, what have you. And so, yeah, I am actually really bothered sometimes in the way that self-care has become so superficial, where it's like, and there's room for all of that. It's just that that has become the dominant narrative around self-care. And I am really bothered by that. Number one, that is classes often because it does involve spending money. Massage costs, Sunday brunch costs, um, bath bomb costs, whatever it is that you're doing, right?
mm,
And so one of my favorite acts of self-care is working out. That doesn't
mm.
cost me anything. I have particular playlists that I will use as the mood calls for whatever. I can switch it up. In my way, it's like some bootleg aromatherapy I'm engaging in. I don't know, like
Yeah.
that works for me, right? So I can have certain fragrances. I can like candles, and it's like, oh, okay, I can just take a couple deep breaths and exhale. Now, yeah, the candle can cost what have you, but also just taking a walk and engaging in some breathing exercises, doing some chair yoga. That's all the rage these days. You can
Mm,
find YouTube videos for free, right? But also really being mindful of what it is that you are ingesting and trying to digest.
mm,
Uh, being mindful of social media usage. We know that a lot of these things are not fact checked in real time. And so what are you even allowing triggered by? Is it even real? Like we don't need the boogeyman, real stuff that we need to be, aware of and pay attention to. And so um and I think just checking out, like taking a break, cleanse every now and then. Some people are like social media free Sundays.
mm.
Love it. That's a whole 24 hours that they are not engaging. That's not my ministry, but I love it, right? Um, so yeah, I think it is absolutely important that we figure out ways to strike this balance between taking care of ourselves and staying in the fight because that allows endurance. You can stay in the fight longer. You can be more effective in the fight if you are as whole and well as you can be at that moment.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the people? Anything else you'd like to say? If not, that's fine. I mean, you said plenty, so I don't want to put any, anything else on you. But if you're like, oh, be sure to say bleep.
Right. Um, let's see, what would I say? I think I would say that now is not a time for fear.
Mm,
It is really important that we find every opportunity to be brave and that we define bravery for ourselves, but do push ourselves beyond our comfort zones. I think that leaders in particular need to be brave. And I live in America too. I get it. Capitalism is real. We work because we have responsibilities and we need it. We're all engaged in this game of services for money and whatever. Um, and I don't know how others will interpret how this could potentially show up or execute it in their lives. But for me, I operate from the mindset of I will eat.
Mm,
Um, and that allows me to live a life with little fear.
mm,
Because if I feel so beholden to a paycheck that I have to worry about hunger, I'm going to be a lot more silent.
sure.
I'm going to play along and, I will put my head in the sand and just like, let me just, stay small and quiet and fly under the radar. And so I encourage people to think about, how far are you willing to push it? How far can you push it? Maybe go a few steps further. But for me, I'm like, listen, I was one of the best hamburger flippers at White Castles when I was 16 years old. I will eat. It might be White Castles every day, but I will eat. And what I don't want to do, I don't want to exist if it's rooted in fear. Like
Mm,
that's the life that I want to live. And so I don't want to allow, and that I absolutely recognize that that comes from privilege. I know that I also have a few different safety nets that will probably ensure that I will always eat. I will survive this. But if I'm not willing to put myself out there, who would be? Like
sure.
if I can't leverage my privilege for the greater good, then why even hold it? Which is what I'm calling upon white people to consider, and wealthy people and anyone else who hold. We all are, moving in and out of these dominant and subordinated identities. When we're in our dominant identities, how are we utilizing that for the greater good? Um, and so I don't ever think anyone should feel completely put upon, because most of us have at least one or two identities in which we are in the dominant.
Mm,
And man, that thing to the wheels fall off. Like take it for several spins around the block, and see what you can make happen. I think the greatest changes happen in the most unlikely of ways. It
mm.
is more than likely not going to be the top, the elected officials and all. It is going to be us. The people will create the change. But it may be incremental, but hang in there. We are all worth this fight that many of us are engaged in.
Awesome.